everyone. So we're gonna allow a few minutes for folks to log in. We'll also wait for Louie, who is our guest tonight, and appreciate you hanging tight for the first minute or so. And I see Louie's in the room. All right, so Louie, I did send a request for you to join as moderator. I'll wait for that to load. In the meantime, I'll go ahead with introductions. My name is Olivia Amaya Ortiz, and I am an educator at the School for Advanced Research's Indian Arts Research Center. This is another segment of our SAR Artist Live series where folks get to go behind the scenes and into the workspaces of some very talented artists. So this week we're going to be discussing the 12th annual Pueblo Fiber Arts Show, which is going on this Saturday, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. at the Poeh Cultural Center. And this event is organized by the New Mexico Fiber Arts Guild in collaboration with the Poeh Cultural Center and the School for Advanced Research. This event is open to folks of all ages, and we hope to see you there this Memorial Day weekend. There will be some really amazing artists who will have booths set up. There will be dancers. We'll have some live artist demonstrations, and we'll also have a food truck there throughout the day. Let's see. Why aren't you, Joel? With us. It always takes a few minutes to get things going. And there's Louie. So Louie is going to be chatting with us about his involvement with the New Mexico Pueblo Fiber Arts Guild. He is a co-chair, and he's part of the organization group for the Fiber Arts Show this weekend. Louie is of Chicano and Tiwa, Piro Pueblo heritage from Socorro. I'm not going to roll my R's. Socorro del Sur Pueblo, Texas, just south of El Paso, Texas. And he's also SAR's 2012 Ronald and Susan Dubin Native Artist Fellow. Before we get started, as folks are coming in and out, just want to remind you that you can utilize the comment box at the bottom of your screen, and feel free to ask questions, comments, send all the emojis that you want, and we just welcome all of that feedback and combo. So, Louie, do you want to introduce yourself in your own words?
Sure. Good evening, everybody. My name is Louie García. I am a Pueblo fiber artist, and I've been practicing the traditional art of Pueblo weaving, spinning, embroidery, braiding for as long as I can remember. I grew up with my grandfather, who taught me the basics of how to work a loom, how to build a loom, how to work a loom. And I've been at it ever since, off and on throughout my younger life. And then as I finished, my schooling, finished college, and I came back to it, then I've just been, going strong with it ever since. So it's been a lifelong passion of mine that I've kind of developed over the years, and have just continued to explore in that area and share some of that with others through different venues and different opportunities, museums, and whatnot. So it's been a really nice journey, learning and sharing. So.
Yeah, that's a great starting off point. The preservation of the knowledge surrounding Pueblo weaving seems to be really important to you. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about what motivates you towards that preservation and towards education surrounding Pueblo fiber arts.
Right. Well, as a Pueblo fiber artist and there's a very long history in with Pueblo fiber arts and Pueblo weaving that goes back several thousand years, several millennia, and the history of Pueblo people can be told through the fiber arts and weaving, because even before Pueblo people started making pottery, they were working with fibers, different various fibers that are endemic to the Pueblo Southwest, including yucca, Indian hemp, dog hair, even human hair. So this goes back several millennia as people, create use the material that they had available to meet certain needs, and so from there, learning about that history and kind of bringing it forward has been really important to me, because that's not always something that a lot of folks think about in terms of the antiquity of our Pueblo traditions in terms of weaving. So things like designs, different materials that are used, different weave structures that that can get pretty complex. If someone looks at a textile, they may just see, a design, but there's actually quite a bit of complexity in how the textiles come together, and it's actually a very interesting history how that knowledge and that technology came up into the Pueblo Southwest from Mexico, Mesoamerica, and was adopted and utilized and kind of innovated by the Pueblo weavers in the Pueblo Southwest. So our tradition in the Pueblo Southwest is very unique to our culture and to our people, and differs in some very important ways from the weavings down in Mesoamerica. But some of that history is very fascinating, very important to share with folks, especially in our Pueblo communities, so that we can kind of start to understand that connection that folks had, indigenous people had, beyond borders, before borders were imposed on our traditional lands. So that's an important piece that I'd like to share with folks.
Yeah, can you maybe elaborate on how Tiwa Piro Pueblo history fits in, or what are some characteristics of your weaving that might be distinguished, from some other Pueblos?
Definitely, as the Spanish came up from Mexico City into the Pueblo Southwest, and some of the southernmost Pueblo people were my ancestors, the Tiwa and Piro groups in southern New Mexico area. In fact, our village is right on the border of Mexico and El Paso, the Texas border area. And so many folks might be familiar with Isleta del Sur Pueblo, which is just right in the center of El Paso, Texas. They are federally recognized, but there were also three other Tiwa and Piro communities, Pueblo villages, just south of the El Paso area, which included my village of Socorro del Sur Pueblo and Cenecu del Sur, which were both Piro communities, and then Guadalupe Pueblo, which is actually in Juarez, Mexico today. So those three communities were both, vibrant Pueblo communities at the time, or right around the time of the Pueblo Revolt. And so several of the Piros from the Socorro area, the Salinas Pueblo villages here in the Estancia Valley, relocated south because of the pressures leading up to the Pueblo Revolt. And so when the Spanish initially came up into New Mexico, they made note of the vast fields of cotton that the people were growing. And in the archaeology, we see evidence of cotton agriculture and cotton, working with cotton and to weave, because we see loom anchors, which are holes in the floor of various rooms for ceremonial use. That's one of the indicators that weaving was an important activity in those communities. So we've seen archaeological evidence as well as the historical documents when the Spanish came up into this area that made note of the vast fields of cotton, as well as the notes on the what the people were wearing, that they were a very civilized, that we are a very civilized culture in terms that are both, men and women, had dressed with finely woven clothing, which is something that is still characteristic of our traditional wear today.
Do you want to maybe show us what you have behind you right now? Sure. And explain some of the you're looking at?
Sure. So some of the weavings that you see behind me is the cotton, mostly all cotton and wool items. And so this piece here is a traditional wedding sash. I also want to recognize and acknowledge that of all the pueblos, it's the folks out at Hopi, in the Hopi villages, that have continued an unbroken line of weaving and spinning and weaving. Although in recent history, cotton cultivation has kind of really decreased out in Hopi, that was also another area of important cotton production in the Pueblo Southwest. And both areas, southern New Mexico as well as the Colorado Plateau, were very key areas for cotton cultivation. So the people, were growing. So we see naturally that cotton becomes an important fiber that Pueblo people used prehistorically as well as historically and even into today. And part of the reason for that is because cotton is representative of the clouds and the rain clouds. And as agricultural people in an arid environment, in a hyper-arid environment, we're completely dependent. We were completely dependent on the summer rains that came to provide the moisture to raise a crop and feed the people ultimately. So that becomes a very important aspect. So a lot of the textiles that were being woven out in the Hopi villages, as well as several of the other Pueblo communities, we see the braided cotton wedding sash, the brocaded ceremonial men's sash, and then hair ties. So my daughters will also be exhibiting with me. I have two daughters of 12 and 16 years old. So they've been busy working these last few months, working on items and this is going to be their first show. So it's kind of a big deal and we're all really excited about it. But my youngest has been working on hair ties. And then my oldest has been working on, I just recently taught her the double-sided traditional weave. And so she's been really going to town with that and really enjoying that technique, which is a more advanced technique. And then some of the work that I've also been involved with, let me see if I could turn my camera a little bit.
To go piece there. But Lou, I'm really upset that you didn't tell me about your daughters before, because I totally would have interviewed them first.
Yeah, I don't know how willing they would have been, but definitely. So this is one of my my kind of new inventions, my innovations, kind of a new spin on a very ancient technique. So indigo is a natural blue dye. It's actually the only natural blue dye that exists. It is a plant-based dye. And the indigo plant actually grows in semi-tropical environments down in southern Mexico area. I get mine from the state of Oaxaca, from a village called Niltepec, which literally means the mountain of indigo. And so the indigo dye is a dye that was introduced into the Southwest, traded as a trade item, and that was adopted by, for sure, the Pueblo people in the historic period, but very potentially in prehistoric period. And there's some work and research being done right now to determine if some of the early fragments of cotton strings were actually dyed with indigo. So they're actually doing dye analysis to figure out whether indigo was present in the Pueblo Southwest prior to European contact. But we know for sure historically, since the Spanish arrived, that they brought up that technology on a greater scale, and was definitely an important trade item. We do know that trade centers such as Pecos in northern New Mexico, Santo Domingo, and even obviously out in the Hopi villages, we see an important trade of indigo, because in the traditional mantas, we see indigo borders, and I don't know if it's going to show up very well, but there's a diamond twill indigo blue diamonds on the traditional mantas. And because indigo was so important and valuable, as it being the only available source for blue color, it was used very sparingly in certain key textiles. And so the color blue, having that relationship to the sky, where moisture comes from, and also water, becomes very important. Of course, here in the Southwest, we wear a lot of turquoise. So that aesthetic of using blue and turquoise, kind of blue-green colored items. Malachite was another important pigment, but that blue-green color becomes very important, and we see it in various textiles. So as I was kind of learning how to work with indigo, because it is not a typical dye that you could just mordant, your fiber and then throw it in a boiling dye pot and have your color. Indigo is what's called a reduction dye, which means that you need to remove the oxygen from the dye vat, and it's in order for it to dye, the actual liquid in the vat needs to be a green color. If it's blue, it won't dye your fiber. So you have to remove the oxygen, and traditionally that process was done by fermentation. And you have to have an alkaline solution, so very basic, to dissolve the indigo, because indigo is not water soluble. So you almost have to have a degree in chemistry to kind of understand how indigo works, but it is a very fascinating dye, a very valuable dye, and it's very specialized knowledge that is required to work with that material. It took me several years to experiment, and I use natural fermented urine vat, which was what was traditionally used a long time ago in the historic period. And that is how the early Hopi weavers were dyeing their wool yarn for their mantas and sakwavitkanas, or the breechcloths and other items. But so as I was learning, I was creating all of these beautiful blue yarns, and I was thinking, gee, what am I going to do with all these yarns? So I weave a lot of cuevas, a lot of belts. So I said, well, why don't I string one of these up and see how it goes? And ever since then, people have really liked them, and it has a very different feel, a different vibrancy, if you will, but all of it is natural. So indigo will only dye natural fibers. So cotton and wool are definitely two of the most common fibers, but you can also dye silk and linen, anything natural. It can be dyed with indigo, but it's a very specialized knowledge that you have to kind of have an understanding and learn through trial and error. But it is a process to go through. And then some of the other belts or the more traditional belts that I do, these are acrylic yarns, but they are also double-sided and complementary colors, which is the traditional Pueblo weaving structure.
And when you do use acrylic yarns, is that just a matter of what's available to you? Like, has it been harder to harvest any of the cotton or wool recently?
Very good question. So traditional, of course, historically, we had to use, Pueblo weavers were using natural fibers because that's what we had available to us. After the Industrial Revolution and the advent of commercial yarns, and then of course acrylics, which is basically a plastic, petroleum-based material, and we got the railroad coming through, the Continental Railroad, then that kind of opened the door for trade and new items coming through, commercial items. So it was kind of a double-edged sword, because when we started having these commercial cloth, broadcloth, for example, and acrylic yarns, and even commercially dyed, aniline dyed wool yarns, then that's when we kind of start seeing a shift in the traditional clothing practices of Pueblo folks. And of course, the men a lot of times were the first to adopt the Western clothing. And then little by little, if we, studying some of the ethnographic pictures, we see slow changes in the clothing of the women as well. Getting away from wearing, hand woven shawls and robes to commercial broadcloth and the commercial wool shawls that the women started to wear. And that's kind of where we're at now with that aesthetic, as far as the floral scarves and shawls that we see today in many of the pueblos. And then now, any feast day you go to or any dances you see, usually all the women are wearing the gabardine, which is a polyester cloth. And so you see less and less of those old time wool mantas with indigo borders. But I think now, I like to think through some of my work, people have kind of started understanding the value and the importance of preserving our traditional clothing, and also supporting the weavers who are learning. And there's kind of a revival going on right now in terms of Pueblo weaving techniques, learning the twills and the braiding and all of these very complex structures out at Hopi, through the Hopi Tutakaiki, which is the Hopi art school. There's many younger folks, younger men from Hopi that have taken interest and started learning these techniques, and it's kind of revitalizing that market again, so that now they're available again. And several years ago, maybe 10 or 10 plus years ago, we were pretty hard pressed to find a weaver to weave a particular garment. People were using solely synthetics or acrylic fibers.
Wow.
And so there's some pros and cons to acrylic fibers versus natural fiber. Of course, the wool, here in the dry state of New Mexico, the carpet beetles and moths will get in and eat wool. So you have to take lots of care to make sure that they don't get bug damage. And then also, wool tends to be a little itchier, and that's one of the big complaints of a lot of Pueblo women. They don't like the wool mantas because they're heavy, they're hot, they're itchy. So that's kind of another reason why a lot of the women like to wear the polyester, because it's light and not as hot as a heavy wool manta. But that was, what was available a long time ago, and so that slowly shifted. But now, through our work in the Fiber Arts Guild and these shows, we're kind of bringing back that consciousness and the importance of, preserving our weaving traditions, so that we don't have to rely on commercial materials because a lot of times those commercial materials are very hard to find and they become very expensive. So, if we're supporting, our Pueblo artists, and commissioning these textiles to be woven traditionally, then that's kind of revitalizing and kind of bringing income back into our communities. And then we're no longer relying on commercial sources for our traditional clothing.
Yeah. Can you mentioned the Pueblo Fiber Art Schools. Can you tell us a little bit more about just the founding of that organization and where you are today with it?
Definitely. The Pueblo Fiber Art Show is something that came about out of some classes, some Pueblo weaving classes that I started teaching several years ago at the Indian Pueblo Cultural Center here in Albuquerque. And with those initial classes, I found that there were lots of Pueblo folks out there who were really interested in learning. And so what I realized is that it would be important to create a market for traditional Pueblo textiles and to encourage Pueblo folks to learn how to weave traditional Pueblo structures and use traditional Pueblo designs so that we could kind of revitalize the tradition, because what was happening was a lot of Pueblo folks were relying on non-Pueblo weavers, for example, to purchase their belts and whatnot, because they were often available at a cheaper price, but they weren't necessarily the same quality or aesthetic as our traditional Pueblo sashes and weavings. So that was kind of one of the first steps, because that interest was there. I saw that people were interested in learning, and I realized that we were in need of a market, and nothing like the Pueblo Fiber Arts Show or the Pueblo Fiber Arts Guild exists anywhere else that I'm aware of. But the sole focus of the Guild is to revitalize and share that knowledge and the importance with first our own Pueblo communities, but also to educate the non-native collectors and enthusiasts, to provide an opportunity for everybody, both Pueblo and non-native individuals, to come and learn and to come and support the artists, and also to provide an opportunity for artists to share what they're comfortable sharing with both native and non-native collectors. There's a lot to learn on both ends, and I've really enjoyed the journey since we started 12 years ago, our very first show at the Indian Pueblo Cultural Center. This is the first year that we're collaborating with both the Poeh Art Center and SAR, and it's something that I'm really excited about. It's going to be amazing. We've never had this many artists. I think we've doubled even our highest number from our shows at our previous venue. So we're looking at about 30 artists, and from all different kind of media, from sewing, spinning, weaving, dyeing, basketry, the whole gamut of different weavings from many different villages, including Hopi, the Tewa villages, Santa Clara, Laguna, where else? Different pueblos from the area. But it's going to be a very amazing event, a great opportunity. We encourage our artists to demonstrate and share their work with the public so that people can gain an appreciation for the work and the time that goes into these items. Because it's one thing to see the finished product, but a lot of people don't really know how much work and effort goes into preparing the material and then weaving the item to the final piece that is very beautiful. And so people gain a whole new appreciation for the work, and being able to talk with the artists is also an exciting opportunity for both, because us as artists, I enjoy speaking to the public and sharing about my work, and then we both benefit in that way. So it's very mutual benefit on both sides.
Yeah, I think it sounds like a great opportunity for folks to buy works for upcoming feast days, straight from the native artists rather than outside sources too.
That's right.
Well, we're reaching 6:30. Anything else that you wanted to touch on or share with folks?
Just come on out Saturday 9 to 4 at the Poeh Art Center. There'll be lots of different artists to come out and see their work and support. There's lots of opportunities. A lot of us, teach classes in different areas. I'm currently teaching through the Herd Museum's Master Artist Workshops, and they have ongoing classes for Native folks at the Poeh Center. So be sure to, look them up if you're interested, and just come out and support. And we'll have Pueblo dances, so folks will have an opportunity to see the context of how many of these belts and sashes are woven in and used in some of the dances, the social dances. So come on out, and we'll look forward to seeing everyone out there on Saturday.
And we'll have a food truck from Mango, so
right.
If you need a break.
Yeah.
Yeah. We will be visiting that food truck.
For sure.
Well, I'm really excited and looking forward to the weekend. I think it's going to be, a lot of fun, and I can't wait to learn more. And I'm excited to now think about it from this new perspective of the different age ranges we'll have represented there, including your daughters. So,
for sure, yeah, they're very excited about it. Before we sign off, I do want to give a very heartfelt appreciation to both the Poeh and SAR. This would not be possible. This is a dream that I had, many years ago, and I've seen it grow. At times it's been difficult, especially through the pandemic years. So we weren't really too sure if we were going to continue. But, I think that our community, our Pueblo Fiber Arts community, have been very supportive and encouraging, and, providing the encouragement to keep going. So when I reached out and asked for help and support from SAR and the Poeh, they definitely welcomed us with open arms. So I'm very excited about this partnership. It's been amazing. Just the planning and putting everything together, it's come together so beautifully. So I really, really appreciate everybody at SAR. Olivia, you and Alicia have been amazing, and the folks at the Poeh, Chris Velarde and Carl Duncan have been amazing. The whole team, it's been really amazing to see how everyone come together to promote, our Pueblo culture and our Pueblo traditions, and see to it, that our artists, have a market to share their work and to support and make sure that our Pueblo traditions can continue for many, many years into the future, and our young people will also pick it up and continue to learn from here on out. So thank you, Howell.
Thank you. Very well stated. On a personal level, it's been really, an honor and humbling too to be involved in the process and see all of the artists' application and the work that they're bringing and their backgrounds. It's been awesome.
Yeah, it's very, very encouraging, very positive to see the interest and the folks that, want to be a part of it. So hopefully we'll just continue to grow from here.
I'm confident that will. Well, we'll leave it there. We hope to see you this Saturday, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. at the Poeh Cultural Center. And have a great night.
Have a great night, everybody. Howell, thank you.
Thanks, Louie.